Good morning, or rather, good afternoon. Excellencies, members of the Board of Trustees, faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends of AUB, welcome to the launch of AUB's 152nd academic year. If you want to make everyone happy, don't be a leader. Sell ice cream, tweeted Eric Geiger in 2013. Purportedly, this was something that he'd heard that Steve Jobs said, but weeks of library research couldn't uncover Steve Jobs saying it. Irrespective of the fact that Eric Geiger was referring to church leadership and Steve Jobs may or may not have said it, he was generally right. The great Nobel laureate Marie Curie once said, "I was taught that the path to progress is neither swift nor easy." At any rate, of all of our university's many accomplishments, I can recall neither easy nor swift progress, nor in fact any patents on the making of ice cream. So our choice and our path must necessarily lie elsewhere. My friends, today we live in a world more complex than the one that my peers and I grew up in, but also more opportune. We have far more sophisticated tools at our disposal than those that presented themselves to our forefathers and ancestors, and we can use considerably more powerful instruments to educate, to carry out cutting-edge research, and to serve those less fortunate. But along with that, it is fair to say that the challenges and indeed the mental strains and instruments of separatism, of isolation, and indeed of violence and inequality have also proliferated and advanced manifold over the last decades. In the days gone by, to praise or insult someone, we could simply call them on the telephone ground line or write them a letter, or, probably the most useful means of confrontation, tell them to their face. Yes, for the younger ones among us, an era and means of communication actually existed before email, cell phones, Twitter, and the internet. Now you can just lambaste someone on Twitter, and then if they prove you wrong, you can just delete the tweet. At the same time, the power of technology has allowed us to sequence complex disease traits in a matter of days, if not hours, to profile someone's psychological makeup biologically and socially in a short period of time, to come up with complex engineering solutions for problems that have defied humanity's grasp for aeons, to cultivate land and sea, and to bend them to our collective will for good or ill purpose. So yes, I believe that the progress in the march of technology ever since the Industrial Revolution has been a boon far more than it has been a bane to humanity, but it has come at a considerable cost. Given these truths that are now apparent to us, what is the path forward in this increasingly polarized world for us as a university and for the peoples of the region? After all, we live in an era where the seemingly preventable and curable plague of cholera has tragically and unnecessarily taken and could take as many as 1 million innocent lives in Yemen. When the devastating war in Syria has resulted in more than 500,000 dead and over 10 million internally and externally displaced citizens. When the threat of nuclear confrontation hangs over the Korean Peninsula, and when we are no closer than we ever were to alleviating the suffering and restoring the rights of the Palestinian people to their own land. This is a time when the refugee and economic crises that continue to weigh on a Lebanese society grow ever more difficult day by day. A society still without consistent or acceptable electricity, water, sanitation, or other basic services, living in a nation making glacial progress in the drive towards social justice and egalitarian treatment under the law, although there was a notable step forward in the emancipation of women who were raped from being forced to marry their rapists. Sadly, the rest of the Arab world is plagued with many of the same challenges and lacks Lebanon's immense advantage of an open society unencumbered by fear of free speech. For all of the surpassing talent, drive, and determination we see in our wonderful youth, there are still challenges. And yet, still we believe, and in fact, we know, and I think collectively we know, that we can make a lasting difference for the peoples of Lebanon, the Arab world, and beyond. It's fair to say that beyond our region, social turmoil and economic inequality pervades and roil the planet. The painful events of Charlottesville, Virginia, where citizens of the very same 241-year-old American Republic, a republic that was ultimately responsible for the defeat and dismantling of fascism in Europe a mere 72 years ago, demonstrated recently carrying the hateful symbols of racial supremacy that resulted in the murder of 25 million people held captive by the Nazis and their allies in the 1930s and the 1940s. And we heard the painful statements of moral equivalency emerge from the holder of the highest office of that land, equating between those who demonstrate against racism and those who promote it. 15 short months ago, Great Britain rode an unprecedented wave of nativism to break off from the European Union in a plebiscite where the clear majority of its citizens voted to Brexit. In some of those technologically, economically, and educationally advanced nations in the world, nativist and even racist discourse has been echoed by senior leaders of the very same political parties that were long ago established to fight these very tendencies. As a child of the 1960s, growing up between Lebanon and the United States, this brings back memories of being in elementary school and watching high school students march through the school chanting, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" They did not want to be drafted. The deep wound of the Vietnam War stunned America for generations, and even today its pain still endures. In this setting, was and is it fair to plead our ineffectiveness and echo the words of Mick Jagger in the Rolling Stones anthem, "Street Fighting Man"? But what can a poor boy do except to sing for a rock and roll band? Or should we rather follow the legendary Bob Marley's anthem, and this is more along the lines of the AUB community, get up, stand up for your rights, get up, stand up, don't give up the fight. But what precisely is the role of our beloved and historic AUB? I think you can safely infer that I neither want all of you here, not our almost 8,800 superb students, our more than 1,200 outstanding faculty of full and part-timers, or our over 5,000 dedicated and resourceful staff, not to mention 65,000 plus alumni spread around the world, to either stand up in revolt, stay seated please, or alternatively to join rock and roll bands. Rather, I would like us to begin to embody a meritocratic society that can set an example of compassion, of progress, of ingenuity, of engagement, of service, and of having the difficult discussions that can be an example to the world. And I am confident, knowing this community better 2 years later than I did when I came, that we and all of you can, to use the current saying, walk the walk. I think we can all agree that education is the great equalizer in society, and AUB is the best testament to that. We have educated Jordanian and Lebanese prime ministers, Palestinian freedom fighters and intellectuals, Supreme Court justices of several nations, presidents of Sudan, Afghanistan, Syria, among other nations, and legions of humanists, doctors, engineers, pharmacists, businessmen, and women, teaching every one of them how to be tolerant, progressive, compassionate, and thoughtful leaders in and of this world. Don't take my word for it. The great Russian Nobel laureate Alexander Solzhenitsyn once said, "It's a universal law. Intolerance is the first sign of an inadequate education. An ill-educated person behaves with arrogant impatience, whereas truly profound education breeds humility." But as a small liberal arts-based research university, we can only educate a select few of the intellectually best and the brightest of the Arab world. This group that we have to ensure will be more intellectually capable than they are economically elite, although it would be nice if they were both, must be the focus of this university's attention. They are the heart of the overarching mission of our university. In this time of crisis, this imperative suggests that we need to look into our very mission and vision and adapt to the times in order to ensure their betterment and that of humanity. In following the events of Charlottesville, the tragedies in Yemen, in Syria, and in Barcelona most recently, and the standoff in Korea, this has only strengthened our belief in the power of this university to bring people together in the rich streams of idealism that course through the university, its constitution, and its history. Those values that many of us grew up cherishing and striving to uphold are now actively under threat from extremists who want to keep out or expel all who are different from them in any way. And extremists don't always use a gun. They can use the law. These are not the values of an American liberal education that we believe in, and we must work together so that our ideals and the opportunities they bring prevail, and not this uglier side of humanity that has manifested itself these last few weeks and months on the streets of cities around the world. I also know that we must stand up for justice and against prejudice that is targeted to others, irrespective of whether that prejudice is based on race, creed, gender, religion, sexuality, or disability. As my friend Otis Brawley once said when defending me and berating some influential Georgians for their barely concealed racist tendencies towards me some 12 years ago, he said, "The problem with you people is you don't teach your children the truth. Like that there's a war down here 150 years ago and the good guys won. Or that this Arab guy you may not love built your precious cancer program." I have to say that we at AUB must tell the truth and cannot stand down to naked racism or prejudice, whether to each other, whether in America, whether in Lebanon, or anywhere. So in this era of great crises, and this is unquestionably such an era, we have to focus our concentration and align our purpose. We've therefore proposed before the board a bold new AUB vision for the times, building on our past to state simply. AUB is a globally unique institution of higher education whose community of scholars and practitioners embody integral service, teaching, and research, all of whom are dedicated to improve the human condition. This university models a just, resilient, and relevant society, one which prepares its citizens to be highly impactful and indeed transformative for the challenges faced by the global, regional, and local communities and the people that comprise them. This is a statement we are hoping to present to the board for acceptance at the next meeting in November. This is not just a challenge facing AUB. The Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges recently completed an executive summary of the challenges for the 21st century college president. They entitled it the 21st Century Presidency, a call to enterprise leadership. This report urges presidents of universities to face these crises head on rather than stepping back from them, noting that despite long-term uncertainty pervading the very mission of higher education institutions, that this is a period of immense opportunity, one not to be wasted. So let's work together to define the opportunities and then decide how we intend to embrace them. In the many major speeches that I've given over the last 2 years to the AUB community, we have sought to weave a coherent message that establishes the broad parameters of these opportunities and the path forward. From prior opening day remarks to Founders Day speeches to graduation addresses, with an inauguration and a speech at Issam Ferris on civil society in between, we have described, based on your input, the faculty, students, the staff, the alumni, a bold and confident university emerging from the constraints of the post-Civil War period to become ever more tolerant of risk, encouraging the individual members of our community, defined not only by a history of significant positive impact, but by brave plans to reclaim our destiny and move forward confidently as a community. A community that recognizes and values our legacy of service, that honors our long-standing faculty and staff members, all while embracing our humanism and overcoming our doubts. We are at AUB a university that is collectively poised and indeed strong enough to lend a hand of support to those least fortunate, to ensure that any extraordinary student, and we have many of them here today, I'm happy to say, who is accepted at AUB is supported to the very limits of our ability, wherever they come from, whatever they believe in, so that they too can one day make a positive difference in our world. Of alumni and faculty and students who create opportunities of others, of staff who understand the weight of expectations on them and mediate that stress while serving faithfully to empower others, of physicians and nurses that fight against sleep deprivation to save or to empower one more life, such that all of our students and all of our patients and their children and their children's children can one day aspire to boldly lead, innovate, and serve. That is precisely why our board courageously restored tenure, and we've instituted measures to define the highest bar of quality that can recognize our faculty's excellence while honoring all the service of the members of our community. And in adhering to the principles of valuing all members of our community, we have looked at what we offer and negotiated in good faith with our syndicate of non-academic staff, reaching agreement on ever-improving conditions for them and their families, even in these economically challenged times. We have succeeded in providing better contract conditions and better retirement guarantees for our academic faculty. We've also accelerated our recruitment of dozens of great faculty members, senior leaders, and care providers for our students and patients, including an extraordinary yield of faculty in arts and sciences this year, which includes multiple world-class senior scholars. We've increased the number of applications by 8%, a stunning increase in a period when more and more people are heading west or east for their education. And we have more than doubled intramural research support as our EVP Dean and Provost have dug deep and saved every resource to funnel it into research, all while accelerating capital projects within the limits of our wisdom and our resources. We have sought to foster gender equity with more women placed in leadership positions and an extraordinary task force looking at the lives and careers of women faculty who will share some of their findings tomorrow afternoon. We've put social and environmental sustainability at the heart of our developing vision. We've strained every resource that we know to hold down tuition increases while substantially augmenting financial resources, career counseling, and mental health support for our stellar and deserving students, all the while looking to enhance and accelerate finding common cause, improved dialogue, and improved self-governance with our extraordinary alumni. We launched Boldly AUB, the most ambitious fundraising campaign, reaching out to partners who share our beliefs and are ready to partake in our mission for the development of our societies and our people. And that's just the last 2 years' work. Just wait until we really get going. And to this, we must now include a very difficult step, but one that I believe is necessary. We have to now provide opportunity, education, and support for the many children who are pushed aside and polarized, the starving and the desperate. I'm talking about our poorest citizens in Lebanon, our refugees of Syrian, Palestinian, and Iraqi origin. In building contact, opportunity, and empathy, even for those who in their justifiable anger might otherwise seek to destroy and defile, we can build a bridge that makes their future and ours all the more secure, all the more equal, all the more fulfilling, and therefore all the more shared. Here it is fitting that we remember the words once more of Abraham Lincoln. I don't think you guys thought you were going to get away with today without a Lincoln quote. Faced with assuming the leadership of a fractured nation, rent asunder by the consummate evil of human slavery, Lincoln it was who in his first inaugural, desperate to avoid the terrible conflict that he surely knew was coming, ended his address with words of healing that will forever endure. I am loath to close. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. Better angels of our nature. Surely we can all look to them. Lincoln would prove to be wrong in his short-term prediction, but not in his basic principle of a common shared bond between the men and the women of the Republic. After enduring under the most dire of circumstances, with time the Union would be rebuilt and it would eventually thrive, its message and its values resonating for generations. I would argue that this university is one of the finest exemplars and actualizers of that message anywhere. And today, irrespective of our disagreements in principle on so many subjects, and you can find many of them if you attend one of our boards of deans or faculty meetings or student faculty meetings, we find those principles of equality of all, of equal treatment for all, set forth by the framers of the U.S. Constitution and adopted wholeheartedly by this university, enduring and self-evident. These are the very values that are at the core of AUB. These are our values. In our programmatic civic engagement, our regional external programs, our magnificent faculties of health sciences and agricultural and food sciences, in our entrepreneurial and progressive Maroun Sam'an Faculty of Engineering and Architecture and Sulaiman Olayan School of Business, in the very hearts of our enduring and exemplary Faculty of Medicine and Rafiq Hariri School of Nursing, we find the very principles of humanism that were embedded in all of our shared experiences through the original and still thriving Faculty of Arts and Sciences. And so we go against the ever-increasing grain of social isolation, of an inwardly looking sphere of higher education that purposes to define its boundaries, to guard against the outside world, its values of commercialization, its all-infecting value creep. We're doing the opposite of what most academic institutions are doing. We're not closing the castle. We're putting down the welcome mat. We are opening the gates. Rather than rail against commercialism, technology, entrepreneurship, service to others, and focusing on self-preservation, we can boldly state today that, as the great poet John Donne once said, no man, and indeed no university, is an island. With the immensely powerful tools and guiding principles of our university, focused on the need to lead in transforming science, health, culture, and society, using these core foci as bridges to developing tomorrow's citizen leaders, we at AUB can move forward in purpose and in confidence. In concert with the other great universities in Lebanon and abroad, but always maintaining and upholding our fundamental values, AUB purposes to step out boldly into Lebanon, the Arab world, and beyond. We will send forth our fleet of ambassadors of knowledge, of excellence, and of understanding. Basking in the optimism of the first day of this defining year and emboldened by the history and the purpose of the great university that is like no other, I am therefore asking all assembled to step boldly forward into an era where AUB can, will, and must make a difference for our students, our community, and our world. We will make that difference as individuals. We will make that difference as a community. Thank you very much.